So part of what is interesting here is that people have a lot of mixed emotions. They're a little bit, sometimes they're contradictory. They're kind of all over the map. And a lot of what you get out of this Afghanistan polling depends on how you're framing the question. So there was an AP poll that just came out that says 2/3 of Americans, even with everything that we're seeing with the withdrawal and the ugly images and horrifying scenes and all of that, 2/3 of people still say this war was not worth it. And that's a bipartisan sentiment. So 67% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans and the independents somewhere in between. So very clear judgment on the war overall. But to give you a sense of how people have sort of like conflicting emotions about it, they interviewed one voter, Sebastian Garcia, 23-year-old Biden voter from Texas, who said, "I don't believe we should have been in there to begin with, but now that we're leaving, I do feel we probably should stay after seeing, I guess you'd say, the trouble that we've caused." So that's one response. Politico, Morning Consult, they did a poll. They found, this was an interesting one too. So only 25% of voters think that the withdrawal from Afghanistan is going well. And I think if you're looking at the images, it's pretty hard to argue that it's really going well. However, they still have a positive rating in terms of voters who think that we should be getting out. So 49% of voters continue to support the withdrawal versus 37% who don't support the withdrawal. So it's still plus 12, even though that's dramatically down from where things were back in July before we actually started to try to wrap up this very messy, ugly situation.
So to your point, there's some just flat out contradictions. It's not even like, people are just conflicted. In some ways, people just have contradictory views. So there's another poll, couldn't find the original source for it, but you see the table, it's originally from a PDF, which is why I'm having a hard time finding it. I think it's Economist, but I'm not 100% sure. But listen to these questions that were asked back to back. To what extent do you support or oppose the following? America sending combat troops back into Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. So in other words, that's like, should we reinvade and go back to war? Okay, ready? 50% support that. 36% oppose that.
That's terrible.
Now, wait. The very next question. America completing its withdrawal of troops on schedule. 61% support us doing that, and 25% oppose it. So that means there are people who said both, we should go back in there and fight the Taliban, and also we definitely should stay on schedule and withdraw our troops. So there's some stuff that's just flat out contradictory. Now, let me do my whole spiel on this, because this is something that really, really, really pisses me off. To the extent that anybody's conflicted or people have contradictory views, the only reason why we're there is because their entire media is full of shit, and it's lying to them every step of the way. We have neocon war hawks who are being held up as if they're experts on this when they're war criminals who should be in The Hague. I'm talking about people like Ari Fleischer. I'm talking about people like John Bolton, who they're talking to as if he's some sort of neutral, objective arbiter of the truth, which is absolutely insane. But then you have the liberal interventionists who are just as bad.
Yeah.
People like Jake Tapper, who are nitpicking the way in which this is going down. And that's the other thing. Even in the polls, people are conflating the process of how we're getting out with the general idea of should we get out.
Right.
Because if you ask just the general idea, should we get out of Afghanistan, it's overwhelming on the side of get out. But then you can conflate it and make it sound, messy and make it sound more split when you phrase it in a way about the process of how we got out. Like, is the execution going well? And it's a way to try to gin up this war fever again. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Yeah. And
nothing pisses me off more, because I remember back in, I think it was like 2013 or 2014, there was a poll that came out, and the war in Afghanistan was more unpopular than Vietnam at the height of its unpopularity.
Wow.
It was under 20%. If I'm not mistaken, the number was either 19% or 13% support for the war in Afghanistan. So that's where Americans are. And the problem with the media on this front, and the problem with the propaganda, is this. Because some people would say, Kyle, I don't know, they're just reporting the facts on the ground, so how can you be upset about that? They're just telling people exactly what's happening. Here's the problem. It's selective emphasis. So as we pull out, all of a sudden, the microscopes come out. Everybody's looking at every little nook and cranny of what's going on, and everything's hair on fire coverage. This is crazy. Everybody go nuts. Oh, my God, look at what's happening. Isn't this terrible? They didn't have 1/10 of the level of scrutiny for all the shitty things that happened when we were there. When we bombed a hospital in Kunduz, and we killed, I think it was 23 civilians. Was there hair on fire coverage over the course of a week about that? Oh my God, we're killing civilians. What are we doing? We're protecting people from the Taliban? In this way, we're killing civilians just like the Taliban. What happened? We bombed a wedding. What about that? We dropped, what's the number? Over 7,000 bombs in 2019. Civilian casualties shot through the roof. We broke a record in civilian casualties just a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Where was there hair on fire coverage over this? When the Pentagon, not the Pentagon Papers, the Afghanistan Papers dropped, it was in the news for less than a day. And what did we learn? They lied to us every single step of the way.
That's right.
Every step of the way, but it wasn't a big scandal. They didn't talk about it. So selective emphasis is the problem. There's lies by commission and there's lies by omission. If all of your scrutiny and all of your outrage is saved only for when we draw down, but you didn't say anything about the fact that our allies were warlords with child sex slaves and people in the military got discharged when they blew the whistle on that, I don't want to hear your fucking opinion if you weren't outraged about the stuff happening when the war was going on. And that's the entire media. So they're dupes to the military-industrial complex, either wittingly or unwittingly. I don't care what the purpose is. They're either idiots or they're nefarious and they're doing it on purpose. I don't care what it is. Either way, don't trust them. They're liars.
They are pretending like they care about Afghan lives now, when, as you point out, the deadliest year for Afghan civilians was 2019.
When we were there dropping bombs.
Because we were dropping so much.
Right.
I didn't see a single segment on that.
Nope.
Not one, okay? Maybe there was one, okay? I didn't see it. I didn't see any coverage of it whatsoever. You had to really dig deep to know that was even going on. So all of these people now running around pretending like they're great humanitarians and they just care so much about the women and the girls. We didn't go to Afghanistan because of the women and the girls. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion. And so they try to manipulate people who are good people, who do care that we try to do the right thing around the world and try to protect people. And they're manipulating those good instincts for the nefarious end. And what is the nefarious end? Well, ultimately, that $2 trillion that we spent in Afghanistan, the estimate I saw is that, we had this whole fairy story about, they're building schools and they're building infrastructure and the girls' robotics team and all this stuff. 80 to 90% of that ended up in the pockets of Beltway military defense contractors. That's what this all ultimately was. You want to know, why did we stay for so long? Why were we so unable to extricate ourselves long after anything resembling the original mission had long been over? It's because of the number of people who were making so much money off of it. And then they have those same people on now uncritically as like panelists and experts to deride the Biden administration for actually doing the thing that should have been done literally decades ago. Matt Iglesias had a good tweet on this that I will read, which says, "Did Biden make the right call in Afghanistan? We asked 27 former senior national security officials now working as defense contractors whose work there failed on every level. Their verdict, definitely blame Biden and not themselves and keep the money coming." Why? Because they need you to think that this messy situation that is unfolding before our eyes in Afghanistan, that's the real problem, versus the real problem being the 20 years of death and of corruption and of unconscionable and the lies that were told to the American people time and time again. They need you to ignore all of that and believe that, this all would have been fine if we had just issued some more visas ahead of time or just stayed another month longer. Then it all would have been fine.
Ask yourself this question. Ask yourself why you don't know the following fact that I'm about to let you know. You know who we backed very recently in Afghanistan? The Taliban, because they were fighting ISIS. And so we used them to fight ISIS. In the same way that in the 1980s, we armed the Mujahideen because the Mujahideen were fighting the Soviet Union. In the same way that right now we back Saudi Arabia and we back Sunni militias on the ground in Yemen who are fighting the Shia Houthis who've taken over the government, and we don't want them to take over the government. You know who those Sunni militias are? Al-Qaeda. That's who we're backing. So ask yourself, all this selective outrage, oh my God, women's rights, this and that. Why has the media not told you that we've allied with jihadists, we've allied with the Taliban. Why have they not told you any of that? Because it bucks their narrative, and it's inconvenient. And so they don't tell you the truth. And, I mean, you got to the heart of it right there. The real reasons were there. A lot of it has to do with imperialism. A lot of it has to do with geopolitics and controlling a region of the world that we consider vital. We want to keep China at bay. We want to keep Russia at bay. It has to do with the trillions of dollars in mineral wealth that's there in Afghanistan. We don't want anybody else getting their hands on it. We want to be the ones who have access to it. And it's about military-industrial complex profits. And you've set up this gigantic network of grifters who are getting phenomenally wealthy off of us being there. And so we're there. And, you know, here we have a president who, for the first time in my lifetime, put both middle fingers up to the military-industrial complex, put both middle fingers up to the establishment and the leadership of both parties, put it up to the deep state, the CIA and the Pentagon, and nobody's defending him. Nobody's defending him. And instead, they're nitpicking the process by which we get out. Do I have criticisms as to how we got out? Of course. Would I have tried to get out the 88,000 people who are our close allies? I absolutely would have. Am I saying there's zero criticisms that you can make? Of course not. But if you're not stressing the main point, which is that on the overarching point, Joe Biden is correct, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the nitpicking of the process because guess what? Like you said, if we left a year from now, if we left 5 years from now, if we left 10 years from now, if we left 30 years from now, Afghanistan was still going to fall and become Talibanistan. Kabul was still going to fall, and it would have fallen in 11 days, whether it's now, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years in the future. So you know, as a matter of fact, the media was always going to say, not like this. I'm in favor of you getting out, just not like this.
Right.
But if this is going to happen no matter when we get out, then you're actually never in favor of getting out. Now, are you?
Well, and the real black pill is actually, if we had gotten out long ago, we're in a much better position. Because what happened? The people that we were backing were such like corrupt criminals, abusive criminals, that it gave the Taliban a chance, who we had effectively destroyed, a chance to reconstitute and have these propaganda wins about we need to get the foreign invaders out and these corrupt kleptocrats out. And that allowed them to build genuine support. Because the people that we backed for so long were so incredibly terrible.
Ghani, the president, the puppet president of Afghanistan, who we put in there, there are reports now that when he escaped to Tajikistan, he left with over $150 million in cash.
Mm-hmm. Bags of cash.
So what are we fighting to uphold here? That's what we're fighting to uphold?
And that's the thing that does kill me. And Biden does do this, and it does annoy me, is he's like, the Afghan army wouldn't even stand up and fight for their country. Like, you going to fight for the dude that just fled with $150 million in cash?
They're right to not fight for their... Right,
yeah.
Exactly. They're right. I'm not making a value judgment.
Yeah.
He's correct that if there were 300,000 of them and they had the most modern weapons in the world... Yeah, they didn't really have the will to fight, but they shouldn't have had the will to fight.
Yeah.
You know, there was maybe 1,000 or 2,000, this Vice News documentary I watched laid this out. Elite fighters who did care and were fighting, and, you know, God bless them. But, yeah, what are you going to fight for a fake country and a fake project like that?
Right.
No, you're not going to do that.
You're going to fight for the glory of the, warlord with the child sex slaves that we allied with? Is that who you're going to pick up arms to and put your life on the line for? I don't think so, and they didn't think so either.
Now, again, I'll say it one more time. Everybody out there, compare the conversation we're having right now to anything you see on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, because we are on different planets when it comes to this. And I think that says a lot about just how objectively terrible they are.